Hello and welcome to A Bit Too Much to Think. Today is the fourth episode in a series about sovereign citizens, and if you're not familiar with sovereign citizens, they're essentially a group of people that pick and choose which laws to follow, and that way they subvert certain laws that they don't like. A very common one is that they drive without a license, and they say that they're traveling, not driving, because they believe that driving only is used commercially. Obviously, that's untrue, but basically, I go over a lot of the things that sovereign citizens believe, and I prove why it's actually wrong in this series. So this episode is on Moorish sovereign citizens. It's really weird. Bear with me. There's a lot that goes into it. So, the first thing. What are Moors historically? So the definition shifted a lot, and it's kind of frustrating. But originally, Moor referred to the Berbers, which are an ethnic group indigenous mostly to North Africa. The definition then shifted to mean Arab, Muslim, and African individuals who lived in the Middle Ages in Spain, Italy, and other places around the Mediterranean. Now, this is mostly the definition we use today, primarily, or at least in the US it is, primarily because Othello is a Moor and Shakespeare's Othello, and that's really the only place that we have it in common society, because most people have had to read Othello in high school or in college. So, in Europe, though, it can mean just any person with darker skin, but the problem is that Moor translates differently into different languages, and it gives different meanings. So depending on which language you're looking at, which there's a lot in Europe that they use, you're getting a different definition. In the book Moorish Spain by Richard Fletcher, he describes kind of the beginnings of this, and in 711 AD, where a Berber army under Arab leadership crossed from Morocco into Spain and conquered it. This, according to the author, is the start of what he calls Moorish Spain. He then further uses the term Islamic Spain to describe the country, so it's weird. Basically, this is the summing up of what it means to be a Moor. It's a poorly defined ethnic group with the unifying theme tending to be African or Middle Eastern descent, tending to be Islamic, though not always, tending to be in Europe, primarily the Iberian Peninsula, though not always. I use the term tending a ton there, because the definition is so loose you can't exactly say what it is, but it's a good baseline. So we know what a Moor is, but what are the Moorish sovereign citizens? Basically, they're just sovereign citizens that give different reasons than most other sovereign citizens for breaking the law. So, according to the Washington Post, people claiming to be Moorish sovereign citizens will break into an unoccupied home and claim that it is their birthright, because a lot of Moorish people believe that black people lived in America before the Europeans came to the continent. Therefore, mortgages are not valid and local laws do not apply to them. From the same Washington Post article, they point out that the name comes from the Moorish Science Temple of America, which was a religion formed in the early 1900s, and according to the article, doesn't preach all this garbage that the Moorish sovereign citizens believe. So I searched for the Moorish Science Temple, and I found actually two different websites. I don't really know which one is the real one, because they both claim to be the real one. The first website that I found says that all members should not be anti-government in any way, and that they should be upright citizens and obey the laws of the land. And it also says, no lawful or upright Moorish American should be anti-government, rebellious, dealing with expatriation, so-called sovereign citizen procedures, or paper terrorism in any way. So yeah, they really want to distance themselves from what these sovereign citizen weirdos say. Now, to be fair, this website shows that they believe Abraham Lincoln was a Moor, but whatever. They don't support the illegal acts committed by the people I'm talking about. So another website that I found also has two press releases saying specifically, don't buy fake passports or licenses, because that's something that Moorish sovereign citizens will sell. They'll actually sell passports and fake licenses. And then they have another one that says, don't be anti-government, that's not okay. So very clearly, just as a baseline, we know the Moorish sovereign citizen movement is not really a part of the Moorish Science Temple. So it's really just kind of its own separate movement and belief system. So the Southern Poverty Law Center has an article about them and says that they espouse an interpretation of sovereign doctrine that African Americans constitute an elite class within American society with special rights and privileges that convey on them a sovereign immunity, placing them beyond federal and state authority. It's actually a pretty good definition for what a sovereign citizen is. So, the SPLC also states that Moorish people believe that there was a treaty between Morocco and the U.S. in 1787 that grants them immunity from U.S. law. Obviously, there was no treaty that says such a thing, but there was a treaty between Morocco and the United States, commonly called the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, signed in 1786. It's actually significant because it was the first country recognizing the U.S. as an independent nation, separate from British colonial rule. So that's actually pretty cool. It does mention Moors, but it does not in any place say that they are immune to U.S. law. There are 25 articles to this treaty, and you can actually read the full translation on the Yale Law School website. So real quick, I'm going to rapid-fire summaries of each article. Here's a warning, it's like 99% ships, like shipping, like Navy sea trade. So, here goes. Number 1, declaration that both Morocco and the U.S. agree to the treaty. Number 2, neither country will fight in a war alongside any country that the other is at war with. Number 3, any goods claimed during war that belong to the other country will be returned. Number 4, when ships of the two countries meet at sea, they will not bother each other. Number 5, if either country is at war and want to see the other country's ship, they will do it with 2 to 3 men only, and anyone hurt will be made right by the country that hurt them. Number 6, any American citizen in Morocco will be considered under the Sultan's protection and cannot be kidnapped or stolen from. Number 7, if any ship needs supplies at the other country's ports, they will help them. Number 8, the U.S. does not have to pay duties, aka taxes, if they land at a Moroccan port in need of help. Number 9, any U.S. ship at a Moroccan port cannot be stolen from or bothered. Number 10, any ship being attacked by another ship from the Christian powers, I think that means any European country, will be defended by any nearby fort, and any people on a U.S. ship that lands in Morocco will be protected and returned to the U.S. Number 11, if any Moroccan ship leaves a U.S. port, no ship belonging to a Moroccan enemy will leave a U.S. port within 24 hours, and vice versa. Number 12, any U.S. warship in a Moroccan port cannot be searched, cannot be forced on shore, or forced to pay money. Number 13, a warship from either country that salutes a fort will get a salute back with the equal number of guns. This is the best one. Number 14, commerce with the U.S. will be considered by Morocco to be on the same footing as other countries, and U.S. citizens can pass Morocco and her ports with full liberty. 15, merchant ships from both countries shall only employ the people necessary for business and cannot be detained at a port for longer than the commander deems reasonable, and all people loading and unloading the cargo are paid at customary rates. 16. If the two countries are at war, prisoners will not be made slaves, but will be exchanged for another equally within 12 months of capture or paid 100 Mexican dollars. 17. Merchants can deal in the merchandise they want. 18. All goods going on a ship will be inspected before they go on the ship so that the ship doesn't have to be held, unless they can prove that contraband goods are on board, and people bringing contraband goods shall be punished according to the laws of the country. 19. No ship can be forced to take anything on board without the commander's consent. 20. If any U.S. citizens have disputes, the consul will decide it, and the government will support him. 21. If a U.S. citizen kills or wounds a Moor or vice versa, the law of the country will take place and justice will be ensured. 22. If a U.S. citizen dies in Morocco, their items will go to the consul, a person worthy of trust, until a will can be established or an heir arrives. 23. Consuls of the U.S. can stay in Moroccan ports and enjoy the privileges of consuls of other countries. 24. If any differences that arise after this treaty, peace and friendship will be maintained until it is resolved. 25. This treaty will last 50 years. It's worth noting that this treaty is actually still standing today, or at least a version of it, because it was constantly renewed. So, after all that, as you can see, Moors can 100% be subject to U.S. laws. It's actually explicitly stated in 18 and 21. It's an interesting treaty if you like agreements about like ships and sea trade, but it's really boring otherwise. Going back to the Southern Poverty Law Center, they also bring up a group called the Washita Nation, basically the same thing as Moorish Sovereign Citizens. They claim to occupy the United Nations Indigenous People Seat 215, which the SPLC follows with, "There is no such thing." And the Anti-Defamation League describes the movement with the following. As sovereign citizen notions attracted more Moorish Science Temple adherents, the Moorish sovereign movement was born. While still retaining most traditional sovereign citizen pseudo-historical and pseudo-legal theories, Moorish sovereigns added new ideas, including the notion that African Americans had special rights because of a 1780s treaty with Morocco, as well as the belief that African Americans were descended from African Moors, and often as well the belief that African Americans were also people indigenous to the Americas. And honestly, it seems that the more you read into these people, you realize that they're just opportunists willing to do pretty much anything to gain money, power, and notoriety. The leaders of this movement, or at least the people that are primary voices for this movement, are really just con artists and criminals. Again from the SPLC, Moorish Sovereign Citizens have also been known to affiliate with other black nationalist groups as well as criminal organizations. Moors have participated in rallies, conferences, and other events with groups such as the Bloods Street Gang, the Latin Kings Street Gang, the New Black Panther Party, the Nation of Islam, and Black Hebrew Israelites. So, this video is weird for most of my Sovereign Citizen videos because normally for them, I'm able to just look at the law that they quote and show why they misinterpreted it, or why the law doesn't really apply anymore. But for this one, it's like 90% delusion. Outside of showing that the 1780s treaty with Morocco doesn't grant immunity from law, which I did, or showing that the Washita Nation is not part of the UN Indigenous Peoples Act, here's a hint, it's not. And I guess I could show that African Americans are not indigenous to the United States, but everyone already knows that American Indians are the indigenous ones. So overall, there's no facts to dispute. They simply base their views on nothing, just stating they're Moors and therefore legally entitled to whatever they want. And since Moor is a weird and loose term, you can't really say they're not Moors, so if they say they are, fine, like, they can consider themselves to be that. But they still don't get special treatment. So I guess what I'm saying is, I have no idea where to go with this one. It truly is an enigma among the sovereign citizen movement. Just know it's total and complete BS. And the worst part is, like I said, the most vocal people supporting this movement are selling Moorish passports, license plates, and tons more stuff, and obviously none of it is legitimate. So it's really a shame, and I feel bad for the people who pay money for this stuff, because they're just feeding into a con artist's pocket. So if you're out there, you're familiar with the Moorish Sovereign Citizen movement, you're thinking about joining, don't. It's not legit. It's just con artists trying to sell you worthless pieces of paper. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of A Bit Too Much to Think. If you liked it, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe. And if you have more thoughts on this subject, leave a comment. I really like reading your guys' comments that you put on my videos. They're actually really enjoyable and surprisingly civil. I hope you learned something today. Have a wonderful day.